Hello! In today's episode, we're going to be making some homemade bread. It's a pretty straightforward recipe. It's from my mother, who got it from her mother, so it's passed down from generations. And it's going to be a team effort. We start with the yeast, okay? So we take about a half a cup of warm water, and it can be straight from the faucet. So I'm just making the water warm, and I'll use about a quarter cup to a half a cup, where I'm going to dissolve the sugar and the yeast and then let that rise. So 2 tablespoons of sugar, and the sugar is what activates the yeast, so you want to stir it till it's dissolved. Two tablespoons yeast, which we're just going to sprinkle on top. Move it around a bit, just so all the yeast gets moist. And then I'm going to move it to the side. And that will rise while we're adding the rest of the ingredients together. So we start off with salt first, because the salt will melt while we're adding the warm water. It acts as a mixer. Then you don't have to stir it in after. 2 tablespoons salt. And now we add the oil, which is, I don't have it memorized. I have to keep looking at my recipe, so it'll be 2.5 cups. Can't remember how many cups of water. So 10 cups of water, because we're doing the full recipe. So I'm starting with really hot water first. So we're at 2 cups. Yep, I'll need another cup of hot water. We're at 3. 4. Now I can add warm. You just test it. Check with your hands. You don't want it too terribly hot. That was 4, right? This is 5. 6. Okay, and to this I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of butter. If you have margarine, margarine also works. It's just so that your crust will get a nice golden color later. I'm just stirring it a little bit to make sure the salt is dissolved and that the butter is dissolved. We bake a really big batch so that when we get busy, we don't have to bake bread every few days. I'm just stirring it a little bit to make sure the salt is dissolved and that the butter is dissolved. Now to this we're going to add whole wheat flour. I don't add just whole wheat flour. I know this, I don't have exact measurements, but I'll add the whole wheat flour till the dough is the consistency, I guess, of cake batter. And then I'll add the white. Because if you just do, I find that if I only do whole wheat flour, then the bread is really heavy for some reason. I don't know why. I'm not a scientist, but I found this is what works for me. Alright, so I'm just going to grab the whole wheat flour. Now, baking bread is something we just grew up with. From the age of 12, probably, I would have started making bread. It was just something you did, something you learned. It was a craft you learned from your mother. You just helped out where you could. And so she could put somebody to bread that was something she didn't have to do, and she could go do all the other chores that were required or necessary. Let's not forget to add the yeast. Then we would just have a big batch of plop. I don't know, it wouldn't be bread. Yeast is what makes it nice fluffy bread. I should have added it a little sooner. This is a little bit hard to stir, but it'll work.
Okay, this is the part Tina likes me to do. It's a big batch. So I promised if she makes a big batch that I would come and do the finishing here. But first, I found my coffee and it's coffee time. Till coffee's over, put it right there so I know where I put it and find it again. So she used the big spoon. John, this is for you. You know who I'm talking about. Let's get into it. These are now dough hooks. Let's get right into it. Right in there. The flour is put in there. I'm going to ask my lovely assistant to add some more flour. My hands are a little full of yuckies. They're not really yuckies, it's dough. She doesn't fool around.
The flour you use is not important. Most flours work. No Name, President's Choice, Robin Hood. But the flour we are using today is prairie flour, milled in Manitoba. Oops, this has not been sifted. We're in trouble.
I like it sifted. Starts to take shape like this. Time to go to the next step.
And I forgot to mention that for every 1 cup of water, you get about a dozen rolls or buns.
And if you do it right, people will compliment you on your nice buns. Okay, my part is done. Nice consistency. Put it back in the bowl. You see.
on top. And put the bag back on. So it'll rise another 15 minutes. Hands on the counter, and then my fingers make this motion as I'm rolling it. I'll try to do it slow. Okay. Ready? Pressing down onto the counter.
So just hands like this, and then you just roll it around. You can see it rolling around in there. Grab another one.
You have to pinch it with your palm. Oh. Wait.
I just make a cage. All my fingers are down there, and then I just lower my palm until it touches, and then I just let it roll around inside there. With all my fingers just scraping on there, and then I just keep going until it's beautiful.
Alright, so the buns are ready to be baked. I have preheated the oven. It's a convection oven, so I've preheated it to 350. And so we're going to put 3 pans in at one time and bake them for 15 minutes. And then I open the door and turn the pans around. Just because I have an older convection oven, he doesn't bake quite evenly. So altogether you bake him about 25 minutes. Okay. Okay, my timer went off. I gotta turn them. Hot pocket. And set the timer for another 15 minutes, and then they will be done. So because there's 3 pans in there, I've been setting the timer for 15 minutes, then turning them, and 15 minutes, and that seems to be enough, so 30 minutes for all 3 pans. If you were just baking 1 pan in a regular stove, 15 to 17 minutes will probably do it. But I would check on them at 15. Alright, it's time to put the bread in Ziploc bags to put in the freezer. So I do about 7 or 8 in a bag, just because we're only 3 people in this house, so it doesn't make sense to fill the bag up. So I continue that until I'm all done, then into the deep freeze they go. Maria, if you're watching, we're thinking of you as we're putting these in bags. Voila! The end.